Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Many Cultures, One People, the third in our series of webinars focusing on the Latinx experience in the child welfare system. It's a deep dive into the experience of Latinx families in the child welfare system, using the core practice model to forge a better path. So this is session 3 of these sessions, and it's number 9 of the sessions that we've been doing since pretty early in the pandemic. We shifted our core practice model work to focusing on the experience of populations in the child welfare system. And we're very pleased. This is the 9th. So it's quite an amazing accomplishment for our team, a huge team of people that have been working on these, and hopefully many of you have benefited from being on them. So I'm Stuart Oppenheim from the Child and Family Policy Institute of California. Again, welcoming you, and would like to thank the people who've spearheaded these 3 sessions, Virginia Rondera Hernandez and Javi Perez, have been extremely busy behind the scenes bringing you this, along with a large team of people, many of whom you'll meet today. So with that, and our behind the scenes designer, graphic artist, jack of all trades, Mia Stizzo. So many of you communicate with Mia, and I think you had yourself spotlighted earlier, Mia. Maybe you could just wave to everybody, and we couldn't do this without you. So
thanks.
Anyway, so I'm going to start with a little housekeeping. 1, everybody should be muted except for the designated speakers, and it's just due to the number of people, but get on. It's makes things run more smoothly. So we'll do that. If you have questions and comments, please put them in the chat. We monitor the chat activity, and we'll address questions and comments as needed. Check the chat. Also, I think Mia's going to drop in now the core practice model, practice and leadership behavior document. We'll be referring to that throughout the session today. So please open that and keep it close to your heart, not just for today, but for every day. So everybody from today will receive a follow-up email, which includes the materials from today. So I know people always ask, there's such a rich amount of material. We want to make sure that you get it, and we will definitely send it out to you. And we'll also be posting it. We're working on, we're posting all of these sessions. So all 9 sessions will be posted on the Child and Family Policy Institute of California website, cfpic.org. And we're also working on a summary document that gives you a nice overview of all the sessions, how they all fit together, within the context of the core practice model. So that'll be, we'll be getting that out to everybody as soon as it's completed. And our Associate Director, Andrea Sobrato, is doing some great work putting that together. And she also has done some great work helping to put today's session together. So, and again, as I said to those of you who are here as you were coming in, if you do identify as part of a certain Latinx culture, please feel free to change your name, add your affinity by clicking on the 3 dots in the video thumbnail where your picture is. And I think with that, I will turn it over to Virginia.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just to kind of build on what Stuart said, we have a whole team to thank for this particular series and all of our REI webinar series, which are posted on the website, as he said. I am basically going to show you a slide, or not me, Stuart is. Why Latinx? Latinx is a term that we've used to identify the various cultures and ethnicities that are under the umbrella of Latin populations, primarily people who have migrated or have been here in the Northern Hemisphere, as well as the Southern Hemisphere in Central America. It is a new term, relatively speaking, but we used it on purpose because the Latinx implies inclusiveness. and we want to include all cultures, backgrounds, genders, etc. Of this culture. Next slide. In order for us to certainly organize the webinar, or at least we've hinged it around specific learning objectives. You want to show them the first one, to understand the history, oppression of, and differences within Latinx populations. If you didn't make it to the first session, definitely you want to look this up. It features not just the history, but the principle of thrivance, which is something that is a form of resilience and thriving in sometimes oppressive environments. And this is something that Latinx populations and other people of color and their cultures have done. To use data to anchor meaningful stories of Latinx groups in the US and their experiences in child welfare. And you heard Stuart talk about the CPM. So really looking at the CPM as in regards to not just data, but also these experiences. Go ahead. The next one is to value meaningful behavioral changes at all levels to sustain a healthy organizational climate and culture that lifts up the voice of the Latinx community. And we will hear voices from panelists today that help us to understand this objective and reach this objective that much more. And finally, to reinforce the role of leadership, to use the CPM as the vehicle to improve the experiences and outcomes of Latinx children and families engaged in the child welfare system. So welcome again. This is going to be another robust session. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand this off now to my colleague, Bear Johnson.
Good morning, everybody. This is the time when we get to acknowledge all the folks that contributed, and there are so many folks that contributed, but acknowledge the work group here. And this series is truly a collective effort and really embodies the leadership behaviors related to teaming in the core practice model as well. We wouldn't have gotten all this work done without the foundational behaviors of keeping ourselves accountable and having some clear, honest communication as we did that. So I just want to highlight the group. You already heard from, and you'll hear from the group today, as much for many of us today. So you already heard from Virginia, one of our fearless leaders for the webinar series, and myself. Gary Taylor, you're going to hear from later today, and Judy Weber as well. Anita Barbie has been our data maven. Jorge Cabrera will lead a couple panels today, so we're excited about that, as will Kate Acosta. Andrea Sobrato really also provided us some great glue to keep things moving. And of course, another one of our leaders, Javi Perez, really helped us along with leadership. Wanjiro Gali from Southern Academy was part of the team, and Amy Rivas and Sylvia DePorto, who you also hear from today, and Eva Ortiz, who you heard from earlier. And of course, also want to do a big shout out for all of the panelists and speakers. We couldn't have done this without you. Now I will hand it over to Javi, who's going to go over the agenda.
Thanks, Barry. Great to share this space with everyone. It's been an honor to work on this committee. I was saying this morning to committee members that it takes a village. It's not just one or two of us to do this work. It's the collective. It's us together. So I'm just going to review our agenda to start here. Is we really want to spotlight the teaming and engagement strategies of several counties today. So we're gonna have Tulare, San Diego, and San Francisco highlight the work that they've been doing. A big part of this morning is going to be around lifting up the voices of all the families that are a part of our community. So really hearing stories and the services and the work being done in child welfare. So that, because we know that we're all in this together, but really the purpose is to serve the children and families that we work with. We will have a break. So that spotlight that I mentioned will be a large majority of this morning. Then we'll take a short break. And then we'll talk about how CPM is that vehicle for promoting race equity across all social contexts. So when we think about race, class, ability, gender identification, sexual orientation, all that's included with DEI efforts. And then we'll have a breakout session. Well, in that breakout session, each of us will have a chance to discuss what is our next step in this journey? What are we going to do outside of these 3 Latinx series that we've been a part of to really make this even more meaningful in our day-to-day work? And then at the end, we'll share and celebrate our commitments. Next slide. And so now I want to just give a quick review around our CPM practice elements. If you joined us for Latinx Series 1 and 2, we did talk a lot about how CPM elements really anchor us in the work. I will invite you to take a look at the handout that should be put in chat soon. And it's just a refresher so that you can take a minute to reflect on your work and thinking about our speakers today. And again, if you joined us for sessions 1 and 2, how does your work relate to these practice elements? We have engagement, of course. We have inquiry and exploration. Teaming. Teaming is so important to make sure that this work is not only inclusive, but that we're listening to what others need, and that equity piece. We also have that accountability. We know as leaders, we have to hold ourselves accountable and others accountable for quality work. And then also that advocacy. I think of that as just a paramount piece for social work. That's what we do at the end of the day. We have to advocate for the needs of the families and the children that we work with. So now I'm going to pass it over to Judy.
I believe I'm off mute. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Exciting to share with you some stories. Before I get into that, though, I do want to set a little bit of context. We in child welfare have relied on family separation as the go-to intervention historically. I mean, we've seen that through the data that we've reviewed, and many of us have worked in this field now for years, if not decades. And so we understand that the core practice model is really giving us the skills and, more importantly, the behaviors to do our work differently. If we lean into the core practice model behaviors and practice according to them and use the other tools that are available to us like SDM and SOP, we can do our work differently so that we no longer have to rely on family separation. It will give us the means to keep families together and to pursue the thrivance that Virginia talked about, the resilience that so many of our families have, and to lift their strengths. I want us to recognize that, and I want us to consider the previous 9 webinars and the content of those webinars to understand the context that I'm trying to set for you today. So with that, I'm going to share with you a couple of stories. And these 2 stories are an effort to bridge for all of us the information that we've learned in previous webinars about what the practice behaviors are and what, and a little bit how we're using those behaviors with success. These stories today, I hope, will lift up to you the impact that core practice model behaviors have on families and the difference that it can make in the work that we do. So first of all, we have the Lucero family. The Lucero family came to our attention because of the young person's homicidal thoughts and threats to her family. In addition, they are in the process of transitioning. And the parents were frankly afraid because of the threats that they had made to the family. And so the parents refused to pick the youth up from a psychiatric hospital. And so I'm sure all of us understand that we often get these calls. And so we became engaged with this family and started to understand more. And so you see here from the bullet points, the way that the social worker went about engaging the family, right? I mean, there was every effort made. After hours, I think, is incredibly to lift up, because that's when families are available, and that's when they're able to, spend time, more focused time, because oftentimes they're working. I think that shows a great amount of accountability, right, on the part of the social worker to be available to the family whenever it was, whenever it was that they were needed. Again, social worker was listening. She was working with providers, right? That's I think an example of advocacy, where she really was leveraging and brokering whatever the services were that were needed to stabilize the family. She understood that even though we're in a case management model, this is difficult work, and the core practice model's behaviors are definitely have a clinical slant to them. And so when you develop relationships, you're going to be able to do deeper work. And so the facilitation of healing moments between the father and the youth was critical, because there has been such a fracture in the relationship. And I believe that the core practice model behaviors, the availability, the advocacy, the engagement, again, allowed for her to be able to facilitate that kind of healing. Ultimately, we made an alternative plan. I think it's really important for leaders to also practice these behaviors, because sometimes we have to think out of the box, and we as leaders need to clear the path so that these different interventions can be used, so that we don't have to immediately go to separation. And so this particular event, we were able to secure a hotel for 4 days, so that one of the parent was able to stay with the youth to facilitate a safe and slower transition home from the psychiatric hospital. Next slide. The Rodriguez family. The Rodriguez family came to our attention. It is a Mixteco family, and in this family, it was a single mother with 2 children. The 14-year-old was being trafficked, sex trafficked, and so we began to work with this family. The mother had previous contact with our system, and so again, Monica, the social worker, very much started with engagement, really wanted to understand the mom's story and understand from her perspective. The mom knew she was in trouble, and she was afraid to reach out for help. That's what was happening in this situation. It wasn't an issue of neglect. Simply the mother did not know what to do with this problem. She supported the mother in securing interpretation services, which is key. And it is also an example of advocacy on the part of the social worker. She wanted to make sure that there wasn't any miscommunication, right? That we were really understanding the mom's story, and the mom felt that what she had to say was important. This mother was so thankful for the work of the social worker and her kindness. She kept saying that over and over again, because in her previous experiences with our system, it was more law enforcement, and there wasn't that opportunity for engagement, and there wasn't a feeling that we truly wanted to help and change the difference, change the experience for the family. And that's in the last bullet there. She just continued to say that it was different. So in both of these examples, I think the core practice model behaviors are very obvious. The engagement, the value that the families felt as a result of that, the inquiry and exploration. The social worker didn't rely on the old story and on the old case files, but instead really wanted to reveal what was new here. The same went for the previous family, in that there was a lot of family dynamics there, and there were safety issues as well, but really taking the time to understand those. Teaming. The social worker didn't work in isolation. There was constant consultation with her supervisor. That's a part of this story that I didn't put up on these slides, and also with other service providers in the community to really bring supports around. There was also a lot of network building on the part of the social worker and the supervisor. Accountability, again, being as accountable to the family as we expect them to be to us. And so working after hours with them, thinking outside of the box, and really honoring our word when we say that we want to help them. And finally, advocacy, just the courage that our staff had to do the work differently and to prevent the separation from these families. So the core practice model works. I see it every day in my work, and I am so proud of our staff who are able to practice in this way. And so I hope that these stories have inspired you and will help you to facilitate the use of those core practice model behaviors in both your leadership efforts and among your staff as well. Really exciting is that we just took the integrated core practice model training to many of our partners across the system in relation to our 2083 work. So this can't just stay with us, it needs to be expanded. All right, thank you. I'm going to pass it on now to Kate Acosta, who is going to be facilitating our first panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you so much. And I have to say, I'm just very grateful and thankful to be here this morning. But Judy, I can't wait to hear more about your 2083 work as it moves forward, and excited to hear all of the great things that are happening over in Ventura. But I'm also very excited to be here with our panelists today from Tulare County. We have Tammy Cunningham, who is a parent partner. We have Yadira Lopez, who is a supervisor with Tulare County, and Courtney Salam, she's the child welfare director, and she will be joining us as well. Marlon wasn't able to join us this morning, unfortunately, but we're very thankful that they were able to, just be a part of the conversation as well, as in our preparation and planning for this morning in our presentation. Before we get started, I just want to also remind everyone, Mia dropped into chat the CPM overview brochure. So as we are listening and hearing from our panelists this morning, I really want you to have that out, but just be listening and keying into some of the what's being shared, the stories, and listening out for the different parts of the core practice model. You're going to be hearing a lot about teaming and engagement and communication. So as our panelists are sharing, be listening out for that. And so it's just the last page of the packet, but that has the behaviors on it. But really be, thinking about those behaviors and how you hear those behaviors being used in this work that Tulare County has been doing. And feel free, as the panelists are talking and sharing, feel free to drop into chat. Hey, I heard this behavior happening at this point in the work that Tammy was doing or Yadira is doing. So feel free to be dropping in and highlighting that great CPM work that's being done in Tulare County. And also think about questions, because at the end we'll have a few minutes, and we'd love to hear any questions that you guys have, either about the program itself or just kind of in general, any questions that you have for the panelists in Tulare County. So I'm going to hand it over to Tammy to just do a brief overview of the Parenting Network program in Tulare County. And then we have some few questions, and we'll just hear from Tulare, go through our questions. And I'm just very excited to share this time with you. So thank you.
Hi, so my name is Tammy Cunningham, and I am the lead parent partner here at Parenting Network. And I'm sure a lot of you guys know that a parent partner is somebody who's been through the system themselves and been successful. So now I help mentor and guide other parents. We help with making referrals. We support them in TDMs, CFTs. We go to court with them. We do some case management stuff, like with basic needs, transportation, but our program is a peer-to-peer support. So even if they're not needing the referrals or the case management, they just need somebody to talk to that's been through the system, that understands. That's what we're there for. So I started doing this in 2015. And while I was doing the beginning of this program, I got a lot of clients that were Spanish speaking. So I had to have somebody translate for me. So I know that there are a lot of things that were getting lost in translation. And I didn't feel like with my Spanish speaking clients that we were making that connection, because we had another like case manager, you know, somebody else that hadn't been through the system. So they were kind of standoffish. So I took that concern to my supervisor, and I had already been working with a potential person that I thought would be a great parent partner. So that's Catalina Villa. And she is, she started in 2016. So she's one of our Spanish speaking parent partners. So, and then with Catalina working with the Spanish speaking families, I know some of the things that the families, the support that they need more of is our court documents are all in English. So I know that's a struggle for our families in that. And also I go to the alcohol and drug programs like the inpatient. I'm meeting with my clients. We have Spanish speaking parents there, and all of their program at the AOD programs are in English, paperwork's in English. So I know that's a barrier for them. So in Tulare County, I believe we do not have any Spanish speaking AOD programs, and Tulare County is known for most of the cases being because of drug related issues. So, and then also, I know it's a lot harder for the male Spanish speaking clients to connect with our females Spanish speaking. So I'm hoping like maybe later in the future, we can get a male Spanish speaking parent partner, because just because of the culture and everything, it's a lot harder for the males to connect with our female. So I'm just looking over my notes. Yeah, so oh, the lawyers, I'm sorry. I lost my notes. I'm sorry. So, and then also another struggle is the attorneys. We don't have, and like, you know, there's a translator there, but I know from personal experience and working with families that don't speak English, a lot of stuff is lost in translation. So not having the attorneys, it's hard enough to get the attorneys to call us back and work with them, with our families. But then when you get a Spanish speaking, that just puts a lot more struggle for our families. And communicating with your attorney is vital to your case plan. So we have Catalina and Lilia, who are our Spanish speaking parent partners, and they try and support them as much as possible, but they can't always be there. So just getting, you know, getting them early in their case plan, that's helpful too. A lot of them, the Spanish speaking clients, we just happened to stumble upon. Like I was at New Visions, which is an alcohol and drug program. I was visiting one of my clients, and even the AOD counselors there, they were desperate, like help her, help us. And I was able to connect her with Catalina. And when I went into the home and I met this young lady, she looked sad and broken. And then I actually seen her last week with Catalina, and she was just a different person because she had Catalina there supporting her, guiding her. And then we also have, we've implemented Spanish support groups for our parent partner support groups. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, so I think that's it. Sorry.
Well, what I hear you saying is that I mean, in all of the work, when you get in with the families, you really listen to what their needs are, and you're really pulling out and hearing them. And I think that's also often what's kind of been missing is that we hear the words that people say, but we don't necessarily understand the meaning behind those words or do anything about it. You know, we hear them, but we're not really listening. And what I hear is that you really listened to them and then did something about it. You took that information back and you worked to improve the system between, you know, the parenting network and the county to improve systems, to improve the quality of service and the care for the families and with the families, to have their experience be improved. And like you said, with that one family that you were able to connect with a Spanish speaking parent partner, that she looked broken and now she, you know, sees the light and is moving forward, and that's what this is all about. So I mean, that's such amazing work to be able to do that, and to be able to really like take what the families are saying and do something with that, because that just sometimes that can get lost, and you're not letting it get lost. So you know, that's so awesome, Tammy. Thank you.
And
You're getting lots of positive comments in the chat, by the way.
well, and also like to take into consideration, like the culture. I know I've had like some other agencies that I've worked with, and they will say like my parents are aggressive, but to me it's they're like passionate, and it's their culture, and just to understand that they're not being aggressive, it's just their culture. So
I wish more people, more of us would be able to see that and say that, and be open to that. So that's what we want for all of our workers. So being able to take that and then share that back as, hey, system, can we make sure that our workers, that our staff, that our supervisors, that our leadership actually take these things into consideration when we're working with families. So I mean, that's the feedback that we need. Like, this is what we need to do if we're actually going to do this work with our families. So Yadira, what about you? How in that collaboration between, you know, working within child welfare and collaborating with the parent partners, what is that like?
So good morning, my name is Yadira Lopez. I'm a supervisor with emergency response here in Tulare County. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak about this great collaboration we have in our county. So I want to take you back to where my practice as a social worker started in 2008. I was in continuing, I worked alongside our families with open cases. So this was pre-core practice model. This was pre-SOP, pre-TDMs. So I have really been able to witness and be a part of the impact and outcomes that this collaboration with our parent partners has brought to Tulare County. And I'm hoping through our shared experiences, we can model that behavior for other counties, so counties across the state can provide that same type of support to our families. So in my current role, I'm working with Tammy and her team, primarily in imminent risk TDMs. I know other counties throughout the state have now transitioned to calling them CFTs. This, as you know, can be a very delicate and traumatic time for our families. They're coming into a very unrecognizable system that they have such a challenge in understanding. They're either facing the thought of the children being removed, or at this point, the children may have been removed if they were not safe enough to stay with them. We make sure that we bring on our parent partners as a support at the beginning. So right at our imminent risk TDMs. Doing so has shown our advocacy, our commitment to network. Our parent partners really are seen by our families as advocates, somebody that's coming on to be a part of their support and safety network. They help them with understanding the system. What is a case plan? What are services? Where are they sending me to? When am I going to get to see my kids? How are visitations going to look like? Who's going to go alongside me to court, which can be a very scary place for our families. It is a very transparent process. We are very open with our families about what are the next steps, what we need to see in order for kids to remain safely in their home or for them to be returned to their home. When we become very transparent, sometimes that can come off as threatening to our families. Our parent partners really help bridge that from a threat to a transparent process. Our agency is really committed and investing in the success of our families by providing support such as parent partners. And this really enhances our families' voices in their own cases. They come from a non-judgmental place because they've been able to go walk through these experiences and now can go alongside our parents as they are experiencing open cases. Now, partnering with a parent partner is voluntary. Our parents do have to agree to have that referral made and be open to that. One thing that we do provide them with is the transparency regarding the successes of those families that do work with parent partners and those that decline. We have seen that families that engage with the parent partner from the beginning and continue to work alongside them throughout the case are more successful. A, in reunifying, B, in maintaining the children in their care, and continuing on even after child welfare services has stepped out and away from their family. Being in child welfare services, we've all seen that sometimes families do return after having completed a successful case plan. When they have came back, those that have been partnered with the parent partner have utilized them. Like when there's a relapse, they are the first call they're making before we get a call. And that goes to show how much of a strong skill and a support is needed. Unfortunately, those that have came back and declined or did not work with a parent partner, we've seen them struggle a lot more to re-engage and to become successful with services. Throughout the case of throughout a child welfare services case, we're always asking our families to change. This is what you need to do. This is what we want to see. But that really, through parent partners, we have also held ourselves accountable as an agency. I can give one example. One thing that our parent partners were able to assess is the referral process. Once a parent says, yes, I want a parent partner, please refer me, that referral process was taking too long. So they stated, rather than waiting for it to go alongside, the court management process, please, as soon as we get out of that TDM, send that referral in. Because then the parent partners can immediately start that engagement process and working alongside of them. So the agency responded and we made that change. And that goes to show how we are responsive to their feedback. And really, this is the feedback that our families are providing, their voice. So not only are we asking to hold our families accountable, but this process really holds us as an agency accountable. And it's an ongoing development as we continue to grow our parent partner program, our collaboration. We're gonna grow depending on what's working, what's not, what changes are needed, what do we see, what are our families telling us that works and is not working. So that's a very exciting process. Another benefit to our agency's collaboration with our parent partners is that they're embedded with our family resource centers. So when they see a need like this family could really benefit from this services that our FRCs can provide, that connection is already there. That connection is already made. So anything that we may miss, they're capturing through that. So we're very proud of this collaboration, proud of our program and its continued development. And we hope that we can model that for other counties. And at the end, this be another successful tool for the families that we are serving.
Thank you, Yadira. And he did such a good job of really highlighting really within CPM, the behaviors, working directly with the families, but then also the impact of leadership behaviors and the whole system of CPM and the integration of all of that working together and it has to be that integration that work together to really help the families. So thank you so much. And so Courtney, I really want to hear from that top leadership, what drove you to want this program? Why was this program so important for you to bring into your system?
Good morning, everyone. Courtney Salam, currently serving as Tulare County's Deputy Director, but I do want to share, I grew up just like Yadira in child welfare as a field social worker. I want to pay homage and I want to acknowledge Yadira and Tammy. They both are selling themselves short. They're not sharing with you all the great work that they do, working as a community partner and as a supervisor. I want to highlight Tammy is one of our driving forces for parent partners. She was doing work in the community before she even became a parent partner and advocacy. I always want to make sure that I highlight that about Tammy and the work that she's done. We started in Tulare County with a parent partner of one. It was Tammy all by herself. And then really hearing from her and growing this program, I think has been so instrumental and recognizing where are the deficits and the barriers, and then how can we continue to move it forward. And so I just want to thank Tammy for being present today and sharing some of her role. I also want to highlight Yadira. Yadira does a lot of work with this specific population, our Latinx population. She is our champion with our consulate, our Mexican consulate, but not only does she champion that role, but she brings it back to the community. She brings it back to our social workers. She definitely has been in different rooms where she's talking about the importance of recognizing different things that are needed for our families specific to this population. I do want to say that she supports the populations across the board, but in Tulare County, our demographics, we're about 440,000 people, and about 65% of those persons identify under that population of Latinx. And that's also reflective in the child welfare system. About 65% of our kids that are in out-of-home care fall within that category. And so this is a very huge focus for us. This is something that we are constantly having discussions about for our families that are fearful of government, recognizing those pieces and knowing that there is some very sensitive topics that come along with some of our folks that we're serving when we're talking about safety and wellness of a family. This is really big for Tulare County. So I really wanted to start out just paying homage to both Yadira and Tammy. I also want to thank our folks who have really led the way to really bring a core practice model to social work. We have been social workers for years. Social workers have just been infiltrating. I say we infiltrate everywhere. You can find a social worker everywhere, but it is not probably up until the last 15 years where we really have been recognized as for the work that social workers do and the changes that we really make and the impacts of our community. And so I'm grateful specifically to child welfare that there's a foundation. There's a foundation that we say we are not only social workers, but we're child welfare social workers. And this is the foundation that we stand upon. When CPM came on and I was just a little social worker doing my day-to-day work, I was so grateful because finally there was something that we could say, no, this is what we stand upon. This is what we believe. And this is the work that we want to drive forward. And so for me, I just really want to thank all the people who led this work. I can also go without saying that it was the previous director before me that really pushed for parent partners. Most of you know Anita Ortiz. She is very passionate about our community and the way we serve. And she is the one who really pushed for a parent partner, groundbreaking things for Tulare County. When Tammy came on, I was overjoyed because I had the opportunity to work with Tammy in a community when she was helped lead leadership in the community with parents under a PACE program. And this was before she was a parent partner, and the fire was there already before. And then Tammy got to come alongside us and really work with us and really share her experience going through the child welfare system. And so for me, this is so important. This is such an important work. I'm so passionate about it. And it's constantly something that we're reevaluating. Looking at our CPM, I'm just, again, I'm very grateful for that foundation work, but recognizing that exactly what Yadira said, it gives us something to really hold us accountable to. We're working, doing life-changing work with so many people, and we need some accountability, but we also need some lived experiences. Our parents really need the help from the gate. And so one of the things like Yadira highlighted is really trying to get parents right at the beginning. And this is even more important for those who have barriers when it comes to language, when it comes to fearfulness of governmental entities. Like we know that once we show up at the door, we know what we represent. And that is it's very scary for people. And at the same time, we're trying to keep children safe in families. We want them to stay with their families. And if they have to be removed, how can we get them back to you? But there are so many barriers in between. And so for our Latinx population, it is definitely that. And sometimes some of the calls are really just because of a lack of resources. But if you don't have the understanding or the education behind that, or the willingness to be open to really understand a different culture or a different person, it really can make or break a family. And that is the worry that I carry when doing this work is, are we doing absolutely everything we can do to make sure we can keep families intact? And so from a leadership perspective, obviously the accountability part of really continuing the conversation. We never fully make it, right? It should never be about getting to that destination. It really should be about the process and constantly reevaluating and coming back to the table. And so for me, it also goes back to just the golden rule. If I was that person, if I was on the other side, how do I want to be treated? It's as simple as that. And so really coming back to that, as well as, if I'm a family that doesn't speak the language, and it's not just within child welfare, it's in all of our public facing services. When you go to get aid and you can't speak the language and you're greeted with someone who's not willing to speak to you or willing to help you, or just even willing to partner alongside you, it can make or break your family. If I am in need of food and you're not going to help me fill out this application because I don't speak the language, I may not have food, which then trickles down to a safety concern. And so these are the things that we often learn when we get involved with families. Sometimes it's just the lack of resources. And so for me, constantly talking about this and just knowing that we don't have all the answers. It is our parent partners that often find out things and share with us, that often advocate. And so for me, it's very important for us to continue to drive this work forward. I would love to have so many more parent partners. Tammy has an amazing director and he is not afraid to advocate. But so it started with one. We now have a few more, but the goal obviously is to continue to come back to the table and continue to figure out how can we bring more parent partners on, because they're really the ones that families really can identify with and can really hear from. They do a lot of work and they will go above and beyond. They will meet people where they're at. If you're out on the street and you're just having a bad day, I know Tammy has gone out and met families or met parents where they're at. It doesn't matter. And that's the true passion. That's the work that we want to continue to push forward from a leadership perspective. And it gives everyone a seat at the table.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I mean, all of your advocacy and just your acknowledgement of your staff and the program and the history and where things started and why it's so important has just been so helpful to highlight the importance of this work and importance of CPM and how it all ties together. So thank you to everyone. I mean, if you haven't been looking at chat, everyone is just like, giving so many wonderful comments and really calling out all of the wonderful work and the different elements of CPM and that and how it relates. So are there any, we don't have actually any time, but if there's any like hot question that anyone has from the group that anyone wants to specifically ask, otherwise, I just want to really appreciate you and thank you for your time today. So any questions, otherwise we'll move on to Jorge and to our next panel group. All right, well, Jorge will take over from here, and thank you, Tammy, Yadira, Courtney, thank you so much for your time.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Jorge Cabrera with Casey Family Programs, and it is my honor and privilege to be serving as moderator for the next couple of panels. I am very excited that we have San Diego and San Francisco to highlight at this time. So first off is San Diego County, and we have a really great panel. We want to highlight safe care, which many of you know is an evidence-based practice. But more importantly, we wanted to highlight San Diego County and the work on safe care because of the significant impact that the practice of safe care has had on Latinx families in the county. So really, I think we're on for a really great discussion about how this intervention has made a big impact. And I'm very pleased to introduce our panel for today. We have Kim Jardina, our Child Welfare Director in San Diego County, who's going to kick us off with an overview. We have a group of very talented colleagues, program directors from South Bay Community Services, which is one of the providers who offers safe care. We have Carla Ledesma, program director, and Tandy Perry, also program director with South Bay Community Services. Wonderful to have you here. And we also have Danielle Fedez, which is a professor and researcher with University of California in San Diego. The San Diego County has done extensive evaluation of the impact of safe care. So we thought it was really important to add to the story by sharing some of what we've learned through the evaluation that they have conducted. So the conversation is going to follow similar to Larry. We'll have Kim kick us off. Mia, if you can just put the questions up real quickly. Kim will give us an overview of safe care and just reflections on San Diego County's decisions, and particularly with regards to Latino families. They added a really important module and component. And then Tandy, Carla, and Danielle will further elaborate on how safe care impacts Latino families and centering family voice. And then the evaluation data, bringing the story alive as well. And then we'll have Kim come back to close this off and share a little bit about lessons learned and really some pointers for others who might be interested in following San Diego's leadership on this. So thank you again to the panelists. It's great to have you this morning. Just a quick reminder, similar to Kate's, just as you are reflecting on the presentation, just think about core practice model behaviors. Think about how what you're hearing, centering Latino family voice, Latino families' experiences, and when you're ready, put it in the chat, and we will go from there. So, Kim, great to see you. Kick us off.
Jorge. Good morning, everybody. First, I just want to apologize. I'm not as engaged as I normally am. Our air conditioning broke in our building. I did not have time to get home before this presentation, and it is now 90 degrees in my office. So I'm slightly distracted, so I apologize in advance. But we're really excited to get to share about our work with Safe Care, and more specifically about the development of our Healthy Relationships module and our cultural adaptation for that particular piece. San Diego County started using Safe Care around 2008. It is an evidence-based in-home parenting program that really targets risk factors for child neglect and physical abuse. This was a big change for us at the time. We had worked with our providers who have implemented Safe Care. It's a group of contractors that we call Community Services for Families. We had been working with them for a while, but they did more general case management. I was actually still a frontline supervisor when we made this change, and we did, as a frontline worker, we were not happy when we switched to Safe Care. I will just say that. We really liked that our old CSF did whatever we needed them to do, and it was a big culture change to shift to really utilizing an evidence-based practice. But as we started releasing the outcomes that we got from Safe Care, we quickly realized how this was benefiting our families, and we're seeing some really positive results. San Diego is obviously on the border with Mexico, and so we have always really had to take a look at how we work with our Latinx population. We have a high Hispanic population in San Diego, and so that's always been a focus for us. But we started to really take a look at our data around Safe Care and looked at the fact that 40% of our Safe Care families were referred that also had a history of domestic violence, and really started to see that correlation. So around 2015, 2016, as a county as a whole, there were a lot of efforts going on around addressing domestic violence, intimate partner violence. And so as part of that work, we in child welfare really started to talk about what else we could be doing to address the challenge of domestic violence. And I will just say, Carla and Tandy are here from one of the 4 providers that have worked with us, but really this has been a true teaming process. All of us have been involved in helping to figure out what we could do to better address the needs of our families. So we had an opportunity through some work really that actually Carla had been doing with the Safe Care team in Oklahoma to really look at utilizing a new module of Safe Care called Healthy Relationships. At the same time, there was an opportunity for a federal grant to really help us evaluate the effectiveness of this and do something innovative. So we knew we needed to make sure that this could reach our Latinx families. And so we put together an entire cultural adaptation of the Healthy Relationships module, well beyond just translating materials, but really making it adapted to meet the cultural components of our Latinx families. So I am thrilled to say that we have had this implemented now for about 6 years. We have over 300 Latinx parents that have participated in our Healthy Relationships module. And I'm going to turn it over to the rest of our team to really fill you in on the details.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim. My name is Carla Desma, and I am at SBCS, and I oversee the Safe Care implementation in San Diego County. So I've been supervising Safe Care since 2008 when it first came in, as Kim mentioned. There were a lot of challenges when we first introduced this new evidence-based model, because social workers were not thrilled of making the new change. We started small, just like with anything. The way our services are divided in San Diego County, we're divided into 6 regions. So we really started small. We started the pilot program with 2 regions, and little by little we expanded. We had an opportunity. Safe Care, as Kim mentioned, it's an evidence-based model. It's an in-home parenting services that is in San Diego County. It's primarily offered to those families that are referred through child welfare services. The main focus of Safe Care, and if you go and look it up, Safe Care is going to tell you the same thing. Safe Care is a curriculum, 3 modules: parent-child, infant interaction module, health module, and home safety module. So those are primarily the 3 main modules for Safe Care. And Safe Care is provided within 6 to 9 months of services with the client. One of the things that we realized as we were doing more and more work with the families that we work with is that this was not enough for the families that we were looking at. If I can have the slides change, please. One of the things, as Kim mentioned, is we started noticing that a lot of the families that we were working with had domestic violence involvement as well. And we were seeing that we were battling with domestic violence, and that sometimes they would not be able to see us because they had to go into domestic violence, their counseling or their domestic violence treatment group. And the other issue that came about is that we don't have enough domestic violence services. So we started trying to figure out, like, what is it that we can do to support our families? As Kim mentioned, I was fortunate that our agency partnered with the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. And at that time, they were piloting what they called a Healthy Relationships module. And obviously, as being witness to this and being trained in this, and just really going out with the staff and seeing how this was being piloted with the Latino population in Oklahoma, which is it was a very small part of town that they were implementing, but their Latino population is quite huge. So we figured if it's working for them, it's gonna work for us. Next slide, please. So we got this opportunity to bring it down to San Diego County. We partnered with the county and said, hey, we found this intervention. It's being currently piloted. What if we pilot it here in San Diego County as well? We met with them. We were able to get federal funds to fund it, and the county said, go for it. Go ahead and let's pilot. Let's see if it works with the families. Healthy Relationships module is designed to help parents learn about the qualities of healthy and unhealthy behaviors, empowers the parents to examine and improve their relationships. So we're going about this saying, this is a Healthy Relationships module. It is not specifically a domestic violence curriculum. It's a healthy relationship, and that we all have relationships. And this is in regards to your relationship with your child, and your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your parent, your relationship with your social worker. Personal relationships are not limited to intimate partner relationships. This educates how relationships can affect the health and well-being of the parent and child. So we teach the parents that if you have a healthy relationship, you're teaching your children also how to have healthy relationships. And we want that to trickle down. We do this by teaching them effective communication skills, which are designed to improve quality of their relationship in order to reduce conflict. Next slide, please. So now what's happening is we brought this in home. So by talking to child welfare, one of the things that we talked is anyone who was in the pilot program, this would count as part of their domestic violence treatment. So if you got healthy relationship, that could take in place of your DV support group, because we looked at the curriculums and we were really teaching about the same things. However, our thing was a little bit more general. Healthy relationship was brought into the home. So families no longer, the services were now in their home. So they no longer had to look for childcare. They no longer had to look for transportation. We were coming to them. We were bringing in the service and the curriculum to them. This curriculum is a little bit lengthier in that the parents are processing a lot. So it is extending our cases a bit longer, but over time, our parents are talking about how much they're enjoying this. And we are able to see just all the growth through the curriculum from session 1 to session 7 of how much they grow and how much they've learned. Next slide, please. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that it was a good fit with, especially with our Latino population, since that was our pilot program. We started with Latinos, and we wanted to make sure that it was a good fit. So what did we learn through the time that we were piloting? We learned that as long as we were able to meet the family's needs, we are able to implement this at the parent's pace. All of our services and all of Safe Care is client-centered. So basically we meet them where they're at and we go at their pace. So this is a service for them, it's not our service. So we really train our staff to understand that we go at their pace. If sometimes it's gonna take us longer to do this, sometimes we're gonna go a little bit faster, but it's all depending on how our family feels and how our family does with this. Safe Care itself is extremely structured, but it's extremely flexible in the way we deliver it. Because once again, we're client-centered, so we want to make sure that we're meeting the client where they're at. All of our documents and all of our curriculums are in Spanish, so we're able to offer all of our materials to the families in their native language. Many times we invite other family members to participate in the sessions if it's allowed and if it's safe. So that way they are all able to know and learn what it is that we're teaching the families. Throughout all of the training, all of our staff continuously receive training. Safe Care, because it's an evidence-based model, has a coaching components. So with that, all of our Safe Care providers, which we have about 30 to 35 when we're fully staffed, receive monthly coaching sessions from a Safe Care coach. So we're always going out with them to ensure that their services are still being provided the same way that we train them. And one of the things that we do really well is that we try as much as possible for our staff to reflect the client and the community that we serve. Next slide, please. So Danielle will be up next.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I'm Danielle Pettis. I'm faculty at UC San Diego and a researcher with the Child and Adolescent Services Research Center here in San Diego. And I've had the privilege to work with the County of San Diego Child Welfare and the partner organizations on the research and evaluation around Safe Care since its inception in San Diego in 2008. So specific to healthy relationships is kind of both Kim and Carla talked about, really bringing that to San Diego, but also ensuring that the fit was really here for the families here in San Diego. So we conducted a mixed method research study to assess the acceptability, fit, and efficacy of healthy relationships, specifically for Latinx families here. And again, the first piece of this was a community needs assessment. So for that, we had a leadership team comprised of community partners and parents. And we also conducted provider and parent focus groups. Again, this idea of we don't want to just impose a fixed program, right? But ensuring, is it acceptable? Does it fit with the needs of the community? So that first piece was that community needs assessment. Then we did a randomized control trial. So here, all the parents were already receiving safe care. They kept receiving safe care. The trial piece was specific to determine the effectiveness of healthy relationships for those parents. And then after that, we made sure also, again, this idea of bringing the family voice back in. So we did some individual interviews and focus groups with both providers and the parents who are participating in healthy relationships. So I'm going to touch on just a few of the findings that we have from that. And then I'm going to turn it back over to the SBCS team. So this is our community needs assessment, the themes that came out of the focus groups. And I want to say the themes were very consistent across the provider and the parent focus groups. With this idea of patterns of IPV are intergenerational. We heard a lot of this kind of, it's what parents know, particularly this acceptance of emotional factors and emotional abuse. Cultural factors matter, right? Over and over again, family, so central, has to be taken into consideration, but also issues of religion and shame and stigma around talking about violence. Service considerations, availability and appropriateness. Again, you can see we're Safe Care and doing this in San Diego, they've already adapted to that, but also language barriers. Parents often don't understand their right to services. So that's a place where the providers really work with CWS to talk about how can parents make sure that they understand their rights. Another thing that came up here is that parents don't necessarily want to leave their partner. So services really need to work strongly within the scope of providing that healthy relationships component so that they could stay together. Contextual considerations, these are very common ones, substance abuse and abuse, mental health, financial concerns, obviously things that are really important. And then this came up in the first panel over and again as well, this idea of families want to be treated with respect. They want to be understood. They want to work with someone to whom they can relate and that is respectable to them. And that is really, really vital to doing this work meaningfully. So from there, we conducted our RCT and implemented HR. You can go to the next slide for me, okay? So 2 partner organizations started with healthy relationships at the beginning. We defined domestic violence very broadly as a very inclusive definition. Families initially were self-reported, but then we also ended up using their report from their child welfare report. If they had a report of domestic violence, they were considered eligible to receive the healthy relationships curriculum. And then we had several assessments that were included. And again, we wanted to make sure we had a really diverse range of ways to consider in what ways is healthy relationships working and effective for families, and in what ways might it not be. So we had a variety of assessments for that. You can go to my next slide for me. You can hit it a couple times, sorry. You can see about 3/4 of our families were our healthy relationships was with the mother, but we also had about 1/4, 24% of this was done with the father as well. The average age of our participants was 30, and a little over half, 56%, self-referred into the program, and then another 44% came from that agency referral. Go to my next one. So again, just a quick snapshot of some of our findings. Relationship self-efficacy. We actually included this. This emerged from the needs assessment. It wasn't in our original idea of talking about how would this work, but it really came out. We were told that this measure we needed a measure that would really speak to parents' worth and connection to the family, and that was really important to include. So that's why we included this notion of self-efficacy, which is also protective for mental health among DV survivors. So here you can see that in short version is all the domains of self-efficacy. Parents improve from baseline to when they complete healthy relationships. Mutuality, which is that green line, is the idea of the ability to provide and receive care from others. Emotional controls, perceptions, abilities to regulate your feelings of anger or disappointment. And then our largest impact was actually on differentiation, which this is really aligned with the healthy relationships model. This idea that parents are able to express their needs in a healthy way and assert their personal boundaries as well. And so all of those were significant increases from baseline to completion of healthy relationships. And this pattern holds also when we look at the conflict piece that it kind of comes up. You can go to my next slide for me. You can hit it a couple times. Thanks. Parents reported using negotiation in current relationships over 80% of the time in the past 2 months when they've been doing this. Again, very aligned with the healthy relationships curriculum. And they report a decline in verbal aggression from when they started at almost 50% to 23%, 23.5% at the end of healthy relationships. Again, just a snapshot of some of those kind of more quantitative findings, but we also wanted to kind of tie this back into looking at this idea of, are these parents feeling connected to their providers? Are they feeling understood? And so in the next slide, you'll see that this is very high. Oh, go back one for me. Sorry. Okay, great, thank you. So parents who participate in healthy relationships report excellent connection with their providers, I can say. So this is the scale from 0 to 7, but you can see I put the actual text on there. So this is from never to always, and right under almost always is almost always. So this is the Working Alliance inventory, and you can see that overall, this idea that parents are feeling that they are close with their provider, they're feeling supported by their provider, and also importantly, that their goals are in alignment, right? And so this is kind of that idea of making sure that they're feeling understood and part of the service planning. And so then the next piece that I wanted to just snapshot on was the satisfaction. And again, this is the idea that parents are overall very satisfied with the program and with their home visitor. And so to kind of continue that story and to kind of take it into their own words, I'm going to turn it over to Tandy to really share what parents are saying in our qualitative interviews and focus groups about the program itself.
Perfect. Thank you, Danielle. Hi, everyone. My name is Tandy Perry. I'm a program director at SBCS, and I've been very fortunate to be a part of this partnership for 13 years. I actually started as a provider myself. So I went through the transition of doing case management and then being trained on safe care. And I'm really excited to see the evolution and really how much we're able to help families. So like Danielle mentioned, I'll be speaking a little bit more to the qualitative piece of our families that we work with and elevating their voice, and also our experienced service providers too. What are they having to say about HR? So what did parents have to say? So parents, here's a quote. It's a great class for anybody that has had trouble with their relationships. Whether is it a family or intimate relationships, it's a great program. And so recently, an example of that is the father we've been working with was able to share in a CFT how much he learned from this module at work as a supervisor with his staff, with his boss, his coworkers, his children, his mother, and the mother of his children too. So he was very happy about being able to navigate relationships in his life successfully. Also, the most helpful thing that I've learned from parenting program is healthy relationships. It's the one thing that should be in the parenting program. And as Carla mentioned, this is important too, because if you were assigned a healthy relationship module, that could add an additional 2 months of time in the length of services. And we know families are very busy. So that is a big time commitment for them to be able to complete the other modules of safe care and also HR is really critical to see that they really felt that it was valuable to them in their time. Next slide. So what did our providers have to say? They agree that the HR program makes a positive impact on parents' lives. That's what they're seeing. A couple quotes here. Some parents have also shared with me how they recognize previous actions in their current or past relationships that were unhealthy. And the module helps them learn how to improve positive communication and have more healthy relationships. So HR really provides, as Carla gave an overview, it provides a framework and language that clients and providers can mutually use to navigate different relationships and communication. We know very often our families and child welfare really struggle with that. So that's really critical. Another quote, parents have expressed they learned a lot through healthy relationships. For example, this parent noted how he understands how he slid into his current relationship. And by acknowledging this, the client allowed himself to try new things to build a better foundation with a partner. And so really seeing that the client is actively using these skills to think about their relationships and what they want for their lives and what they want to see moving forward. And this is really common, and something that's really common too is really after the module is complete, families very often will continue to use the language and the skills and have conversations with their providers about really how it's impacting their lives well after the module is complete. So this is without prompting. So for those of us who work with families who are very busy and have lots of stress going on in their lives, to use terminology that was once familiar to them to really analyze moving forward is really powerful. Next slide. All right, so we thought it would be fun to do a little word cloud. So we asked our providers to provide the top 3 words that come to mind when they think about the HR module and how it helps our families. So I think by this time, we're probably all familiar with the word cloud, but basically the more a word is used, the bigger or more it will stand out in the slide. And so as you can see here, boundaries and empowered were the top 2 words that came out. And so we know this is really huge with the families that we work with. They're dealing with so many things and so much going on in their lives, and they're very challenged. So being able to set boundaries with people in their lives and situations in their lives and to feel empowered to be able to do that is really critical. So those 2 stand out. And there's also a lot of other words in there that are very powerful and healing. And so you can see acceptance, protect, control, awareness, supportive, educational, insightful, relatable, confidence, patience. So really clients are feeling, or our providers are feeling, this is what they're seeing with clients, and clients are reflecting that back to them, that they are able to pause and make decisions, that many things are out of their control, but they can control how they're going to proceed in their lives. And they feel like they have some tools to be able to navigate that. Next slide. All right. And so what we're saying here basically is that providers and parents both unequivocally think that the HR program is culturally relevant. So a few more quotes just to nail down that point is it's a good fit for Latinx families, a parent shared. A provider shared, this is very helpful to our clients due to the beliefs that they have and what they bring to a relationship. Another parent quote, we are prideful. Yes, I would recommend the program for Latinx families. We have non-healthy relationships. A provider, I feel the HR module is culturally sensitive to all types of families and should be made available for all families. So again, all these are very powerful. And I think for providers who are providing an evidence-based curriculum to really feel that though, like Carla said, is very structured, it is very flexible. And so we're really still able to meet the complex needs of our family in the fashion that they see best. Next slide. And so as mentioned, we're very fortunate and very thankful that today Safe Care with Healthy Relationships is being implemented system-wide in our county, which we're really grateful for. And with that, I'll turn it over back to Kim, our Director of Child Welfare. Thank you.
Andy, thanks everybody. So when I think about the core practice model behaviors, hopefully you heard things around engagement, our teaming, our advocacy, and our accountability. For us, we don't often think of evaluation as really an engagement opportunity for families, but one of the things we did in particular was invested in the use of mobile technology so that all of our Safe Care providers, they actually take the iPad out and the evaluation is embedded within the session. And so parents put the information directly into the iPad so we get that feedback directly from families every few weeks about how they're doing. We review all of that at a leadership level, and that truly drives decision-making about any changes we're making, how we continue to move forward, whether or not we were going to take this from a pilot to full system-wide implementation. And that is an integrated part of our entire Safe Care implementation. For counties who may be thinking about doing work like this, I think there are a few things that are really important. The engagement and partnership that you have to have with your provider agencies is essential. They are the boots on the ground doing this work. And if you're not willing to listen to them around what is needed, what the best approach should be, it's not going to be effective. We also have to be advocates on their behalf, right? They can't do this alone. They need resources and support to make an effective implementation. And so I think that piece is really, really critical. And so you want to plan for what infrastructure needs you're going to have to put into place, as well as planning for sustainability. So we have known all along, even though we got a grant to actually translate the material and culturally adapt healthy relationships, we have always worked with our board of supervisors and our leadership to figure out what is the sustainable funding over time, so that if this is effective, we can make sure that this is something that continues to be available for our families. So we are happy to answer questions in the chat. I know we have another panel, but we really appreciate the opportunity to share our work today.
Thank you so very much, Kim and Carla, Tandy, Danielle. This is amazing. A lot of really great kudos in the chat. And you get the prize for synthesizing what would have been a half a day to our presentation into this small amount of time. You were quite amazing. Thank you. There is a question in the chat that we might want to just respond, one of you. The question has to do with is this available to other clinicians in the community, right? Of the healthy relationships module. So thank you again. So I know we need to move on to San Francisco. Thank you, San Diego. Thank you, South Bay Community Services and Danielle. So I am now very excited to bring our next panel, San Francisco. We have Jessica Matthew-Newsome, who's a program director for early intervention services at San Francisco Health and Human Services. And we also have Larissa Rostran Navarro, who's a protective service supervisor with the supportive transition program also in San Francisco Health and Human Services. So welcome, Jessica, Larissa. And we also wanted to, so safety organized practice is the focus of our panel today. We thought that this was another opportunity. Safety organized practice, as you know, is really the values, behaviors, interventions are fundamental in the core practice model. So we think it's extremely relevant. San Francisco County has done quite a bit of work on implementing SOP with a particular focus on Latinx families. So that's what Jessica and Larissa are going to talk about. So if you can put the questions on real quickly, Mia, thank you. So we want to just ask Jessica to kick us off as to the leadership decision that was behind really bringing SOP to a larger focus with Latinx families. Then Larissa is going to talk from a social worker perspective. She has a great example to share with us, as well as how SOP tools add a significant value to the work of centering family voice. And then we'll bring it back to Jessica, who will share a little bit about lessons learned and just feedback for others who want to bring this focus with SOP. So thank you again. And Jessica, we turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jorge. Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. Actually, can you put the next slide on, please, Lisa? Okay, thank you. So the reason the leadership in San Francisco chose to promote and implement safety organized practice, and I'll say the core practice model as well, for many reasons. One being that its main beliefs is that all families have strengths. SOP uses strategies and techniques that align with the belief that the child and the family are the central focus, and the partnerships really exist to offer solutions for them to ensure safety, permanency, and well-being. We team with the family. For Latinx families, it's all about meeting the family where they are, offering culturally appropriate services in their language, being culturally humble and open to learning and listening about their life experiences, being able to learn from their experience around immigration and acculturation, being trauma-informed, helping them gather their team or build one, frequent communication in different formats, knowing that there are differences among the Latinx populations. Part of the work also with Latinx families is about around education of the systems and processes here in the United States that they are not familiar with or not able to communicate their thoughts, about what they understand and do not understand, and being able to communicate with them in terms that they would understand, helping them navigate through it, giving them a voice and being transparent, but being empathetic in the process of that too. Such tools as the behaviorally based case plans, the CFTs, the circles of support, consultation and information sharing network, harm and danger statements, red teams, safety houses, safety mapping, safety planning, solution-focused questions. The 3 houses helps improve engagement, helps us stay culturally humble, trauma-informed, solution-focused, and highlights their strength, as well as helps us understand any challenges and barriers so that we can better team with them to support them to achieve their goal. Core practice model / SOP values listening and learning from the family and their experiences. And for Latinx families, that can change the trajectory of their continued involvement in the child welfare system. So thinking with that, I will now pass it over to Larissa Rostran Navarro, Protective Services worker in San Francisco.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Larissa Rostran Navarro, and I am currently a supervisor in supportive transition, but I was a supervisor with ER. So yes, so I'm just going to give you an overview of why, right? The difference that SOP has brought to our Latinx families. So one of the primary things that I noticed is that it focuses on behaviors and not services. It creates clearly, for us to communicate clearly the harm and danger statements and safety goals. What that did in our county is that it provided very clear, specific clarity about what we were worried about. So that, it communicated that not only to the parents, but their support network providers and the social workers. So once we knew what we really were worried about, we knew what expectations to set in regards of what behaviors needed to change. So that, it created that clear communication amongst the team. It is also a way of thinking that informs all of the stakeholders. So it developed a common language, purpose, and goal amongst the team. Everyone in that team, the parents, their support network, the providers, and the social workers, we understood the language that we were talking about. For example, everyone knew what complicating factors were, right? We knew the difference between the strength and acts of protections. And the most important thing that it created in regards to the common language and purpose is that it gave the parents the clarity, right, of what behaviors needed to be demonstrated over time to achieve safety. So, we were all talking the same language because there was that ongoing communication and clear communication. And it gives us a set of principles to guide us. We all know the families are the experts about how they function and their culture. We know that they have acts of protections, and we strongly believe that behaviors can change. We also know that, for families that already have a support network, that support network can be so supportive in achieving safety, well-being, and permanency, and maintaining it past the intervention of child welfare. But we also believe that for those families who have limited support network, that we can support them in building their support network so that they can achieve that same. So what I noticed with many of our Latinos families is that, because of shame, once they hear CPS is knocking on the door, embarrassment, and so forth, many times they tell us, oh, I don't have no one else can know about this. But we know that they do. So what, in reference to what Jessica said earlier, like cultural humility, I strongly believe that actually cultural humility existed prior to safety organized practice. I think a safety organized practice opened a bigger door to inquiry, right? And curiosity, and really learning more for the families to let us know what their beliefs are. And so therefore we highlighted on those, or their beliefs, use those as their strength and highlighted on those strengths to continue achieving that safety and well-being. So we can go to the next slide, Jorge. So I'm gonna share with you guys. So this happened about 12 years ago. I was a worker at the time in core dependency. This is around the time where we, San Francisco started with safety organized practice, implementing safety organized practice. And this is a case that landed on my desk regarding a 23-year-old mother. That's, mother. She was expecting. She also had a 10-month-old daughter. And her support network comprised of her mother, maternal grandmother, maternal great aunt, and maternal cousins. In her family composition, there was also a boyfriend who was 27 years old. He was the father of the unborn child, but he was not the father of the 10-month-old baby. The reason why the case came in It was because the 10-month-old presented at the hospital with non-accidental injuries of her legs. And there were in the skeletal survey basically showed all fractures that were healing on her wrist. So prior, so I mean, we're talking about, and initially there was no story to it. Nobody knew what happened. And also nobody knew, there was unknown perpetrator. So prior to safe to organized practice, I think that this is one of those cases where we're talking about non-accidental injuries. We don't even know who did it. There's no way we're gonna reunify this kid. So prior to implementing a safe to organized practice, there were no tools to guide us. They were basically, we didn't focus on the behavior. We focused on the parents, right? Who did it? We were so consumed over, like wanting to know and get to the bottom of it. How did this happen? Who did it? Because without that, we didn't know how to move forward. And which at the same time, working from that perspective, it kind of limited us, right? We were more cautious about thinking outside the box and taking risk with families. And in this case, I think prior to safe to organized practice, it would have been an immediate removal of the newborn once the baby was born. Limited the family voice. And I think also that, we have the support of the agency and the courts about limiting reunification. I mean, given that this child was 10 months old, this family would have only given a shot of 6 months of reunification because she was under the age of 3, right, per our court mandate. So that's prior to SOB. Now, luckily, this came to my desk in the moment that we were initiating all this safe to organized practice, and this is what I did with this family. Then I immediately started utilizing the tools it's from safe to organized practice. For example, the 3 questions, solution focused questions, safety house. And the most important for me, it was the mapping quadrant that I used with this family. I used it during meetings. I used it during home visits. I used it during CFT because I wanted all of us, the team, to understand and have the common, purpose and goal and language. As you can see, my quadrant has always been with me. It's right here. It's never left my desk. And I utilized, at that time, we were provided with coaching sessions. So I really took advantage of those coaching sessions. And I want to give a big thank, and I think she's here today, to Veronica Piper Jefferson, because she was my coach. And I remember every time she was in the office, I was meeting about this family. And her coaching really directed me to including the family voice. Incorporating really behavior specific in the case plan, identifying behavior specific case plans for the family. And it just included the family voice. The grandmother, the maternal auntie, the cousins, they were all part of this decision making, right? I mean, we have a 23-year-old who was just learning to be a parent. And if you see with that example, when you look at the culture, what you can really see is that this is a very matriarchal family, right? All of the support was the maternal grandmother, the maternal great aunt, and they were all parents. They're all being parents. So they were they're supporting this mother, right? As a new mother. And so what that led, having that clear communication about the harm statement and what we wanted to see over time, it gave me also the confidence, right? For safety planning with the newborn. So where the newborn did not have to be removed. By the time this baby was born, we had been working as a team that I was 100% confident that there was no need to remove this baby. And so it allowed me to safety plan with the newborn, and it made reunification faster. The 10-month-old actually reunified with the mother after 9 months. Actually, I felt that it could have been sooner, but the 9 months was actually really more outside obstacles, like the court, because since it was non-accidental injuries, the attorneys were just very reserved about proceeding with the reunification without having all the medical evaluations completed and all the results, of medical evaluations received that were ruling out different diseases or illnesses. So, so this is, something that I really enjoy doing. I love safety organized practice, and yeah. So, any questions? But yeah, this is some of the one of the examples that I thought. But like I said, SOP just opened the door for that bigger cultural understanding. And I'm not going to give you fixed examples, but in 2 other cases, with a young man who strongly believed that his family has been cursed, I make sure I facilitated a limpia for him, because that made the whole change. A limpia, for those of you, it's a cleansing, right? So we had a shaman go to the place and do a cleansing for him. And for a mother, a Mexicana mother that I had, I actually incorporated drumming meditation in her case plan. So I'm not going to talk about once I transfer the case, because that was a little bit impressive, because there's difference in perspective, and that other team was not already up to board. And so to explain the drumming meditation, it was not clinical therapy. First of all, it was cheaper because the drumming session worked once a week for $30, and it did what it did a purpose, right? Because this was not a family who required clinical treatment. It was a cultural, things. This is all mom knew how to do, and we just needed to meet her where she was at. So those are other examples that I have been able to, think outside the box and extend outside of the, what we know in child welfare, such as parenting classes, individual therapy, and things like that. But I'll pass it over now to Jessica before I eat all the time.
I just want to say something else about her. She's a supervisor now, and it's those things that she is coaching her staff about, because I've seen it. And I want to say that you've done and you continue to do fantastic work. I mean, you really, highlight what SOP and core practice model is all about. So I just want to say that. So I kind of give a little snapshot of one of our safety dashboard measures, and it's around safety planning. And this is Latinx initial safety decision by year, starting with 2017, just to give you a little look at it, and 20 to 2021, where it shows a percentage of referrals that come into our system. The blue would be safe, the orange color would be safe with plan, and then the gray is unsafe. So as you see, we are improving on safety planning with families, and that takes me, to like lessons learned about what we've learned from SOP and core practice model. So I just want to say real quick, from 2017, where we were safety plan around 7%, to 2021, where we have safety plan with families around 22%. So it is improving, so that's a good thing. Next slide, please. So in terms of lesson learned for us in San Francisco, in working with the Latinx communities and families, from our leadership perspective, has been that we need to continue to remain culturally humble. We need to be able to listen and learn. We don't have to have all the answers. We can learn from our families and their experiences. We need to be advocates of these practices, sometimes pushing back on the skepticisms of our decisions and what ifs. We need to be creative and think out the box. Larissa gave some wonderful examples of that. Tailoring the service to the family and asking them what they think will work to change that worrisome behavior. Utilize our early adopters to coach others and help lead the way. Supporting coaching, training, and supporting the internal trainers so they increase their comfort level needed to train and support the practice. We need to have courageous conversations about worries. Let's have those conversations, not act on them, but let's talk about them. Let's share success stories. This is a great example of a success story. We could have more of these. Being aware of youth power. The power of community, the ability for the community to wrap a family in support and services versus the child welfare system. being able also as leaders to hold some risk as an agency for families, keeping in mind that these decisions are not made by the child welfare worker alone. This worker also has a team, and we support teaming with the family, but we also support teaming within the work and with the workers and the staff as well. For example, a family may be very marginal, but if there's an ability to mitigate a safety threat, create the viable safety plan and keep a family together, although there may be many worries and a probability that maybe the safety plan may fail, but we still owe it to the families to try and not make assumptions that it will not work. And this is where some of the advocating at a higher level may need to be, advocated at. So with that is the end of our presentation. So we welcome any questions from anybody.
Thank you so much, Jessica, Larissa. Great examples and great stories to really make a compelling profile of the amazing work that you're doing. So yeah, we are at time. Any hot questions that anybody might have? Otherwise, we just want to really great appreciation to the 3 panels today, to Larry, San Diego, and San Francisco, for being here with us today and just sharing some really powerful and compelling content. So with that in mind, we are going to go into a 10-minute break. So it's close to 10:45. So if we can be back at 10:55, we would greatly appreciate it. So thanks again, panelists. And we are now in break, 10 minutes.
Well, welcome back from break, everybody. I hope you had time to stretch your legs and just take care of anything you need to take care of. But I wanted to just kind of set some context here as we look back over this last year and a half of our journey using CPM as this vehicle to promote social and racial justice. Over a year ago, as Stuart mentioned, CFPIC launched a webinar series that would end up being 9 webinars in total, and today's the 9th one, but that served as a learning collaborative of people, of us, of you, who might share cross-cultural wisdom, lived experience, and expertise. We began our race, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or READY, as we say, REDI. We began our READY webinar series by providing the historical context for structural racism and creating opportunities for leaders at all levels to explore, through some facilitated conversations, possible connections between the CPM leadership behaviors and the antidotes to dominant culture and characteristics in big systems. We followed with a deep dive into the history and experiences of the tribes of sovereign nations of people who have also interfaced with the child welfare system, and with the imperative calling upon each of us to carry out ICWA in a way that honors the tribes as sovereign nations and as an absolute standard from which all interactions must flow. And finally, over the last 3 months, we have explored the rich, vast, and diverse Latinx communities and have learned together about strategies and about the enduring resilience and strength, or thrivance, are the word, and how we must base our relationships, assessments, plans, innovations upon that strength. Or I'm going to go further than strength and say thrivance. We've got to look for it. We've got to see it. We've got to expect it. And we've got to listen. And we've got to really want to make that connection with our Latinx families. We had powerful panels today that showed us how they're doing it in the 3 counties. But each webinar series had a common goal: to strengthen our understanding of the complexity and diversity of the communities we serve in child welfare, and to increase the effectiveness of our practice at the family level and at the organization level. And each of these webinars, we saw that the tenets of effective practice linked completely with the foundational CPM practice behaviors, principles, values. The big takeaway was that our practice model, the CPM, if filtered through a racial and social justice lens, might provide some powerful guidance around diversity, equity, and inclusive practice. Our working premise was that CPM, anchored in values and theory and producing practice and leadership behaviors. So the whole model, when I say CPM, I mean the whole model, but our working premise was that the CPM could serve as a vehicle for change and could help us advance racial and social justice, even within the context of child welfare. So let's look back over a few big ideas in our webinar series. Gary, would you take us back? Would you help us look back over how we got started?
Yes, thank you so much, Andrea. The first series had to do with racial justice in the child welfare system. And we actually started looking at African-American outcomes. But I want to be careful to say that, these lessons learned as we go through apply to many groups or all groups or most groups. It just happens to be where we started. Thank you. Next slide, please, Mia. Okay. And so the learning objectives for the series were, number one, to know the context and the history of racism. Andrea has mentioned racism. So know that history of racism within the child welfare system in order to appreciate the impact that race has on decision-making. This was important because I say this often, if we don't know where we came from, we have a hard time knowing where we're going. And so by looking at that history, we could learn what was effective, what worked well, what did not work well, what things can we build up on, or how do I avoid making missteps or mistakes that I may have made previously. So that history is very important. And then also just, we come from different backgrounds, experiences, and just to help child welfare leaders and our staff to understand the history, which would then give them a different perspective, perhaps, right? Because if I've not experienced it, I might not understand it. The second thing was to understand key principles that leaders visibly practice in order to set the stage for addressing racial justice in their organizations. And the principle is really basically a truth, something that you believe in, and then that kind of shows up in how you behave. So to understand the key principles that leaders can practice and model for their staff in order to set the stage for having this conversation and doing the work. Thirdly, leverage CPM behaviors to initiate conversations about racial justice that allow for constructive discomfort, productive conflict, and courageous advocacy. In the helping profession, we often avoid, I think, things sort of discomfort. We avoid conflict. But conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. There's often could be some benefit in conflict. And fourth, to learn about strategies that counties and states are using to address racial injustice in the child welfare system. So as we go through, and particularly, it's been mentioned a few times that we have resources. As you go through those resources, they really provide a plethora of strategies that can help leaders and help counties to move through this process. Thank you. Next slide, Mia. Okay. Although race has no basis in biology, racism for many people is very, very real. And as a society, we've made racism real in that we group people often by how they look. And so based on how they look, and in actuality, when you think about race, we are 99% more alike as humans through our DNA than we are way more alike than we are different. The impacts of racism are pervasive and go way beyond direct harm to only people of color. There are disparities in health, disparities in education, disparities in income, housing. And if you think about those disparities, poverty, how those things influence family and their ability or inability to provide for their children, and then how we in turn may respond to that inability. The transformation of our system requires elimination of institutional and structural racism. And I'm going to get into that a little more on the next slide. Actually, that operates at 4 levels. So I'll get into a little more detail about that. And then the language available to us is insufficient to fully capture the experience and the impact of racism. And this is why we have to lean into the core practice model behavior of engaging and trying to understand people, connecting with people. Because again, if I perhaps have not experienced it, the language might not have an impact and may not land with me in the particular way intended. So again, we have to move beyond that language and kind of get to know people to understand. We took a look at racism and how it operates at 4 levels, and you can see internalized and then interpersonal, institutional, and structural. I really want to focus on the internalized and talk about beliefs, biases. Again, bias, similar to conflict, I think is a word that we as a society are sometimes uncomfortable with, but the reality is that we have them. It sometimes helps us to organize our world, to make sense of our world. For instance, social workers, when you go in the field, being able to kind of use that bias lens to kind of see where you are, who's in the room, what's going on around you, serves a purpose, a very useful purpose. And the good bias might be me deciding to buy a Toyota rather than a Honda. There's no harm in that. But then bias can show up in negative ways. And I want to talk about 2 types of bias. One of them have been what is referred to as an anchoring bias, where we just make a decision or an opinion based on first glance. And one of our speakers, I think the speaker from Tulare, talked about how a parent has showed up and based on their speech, them advocating themselves, expressing their opinion, they were referred to as hostile or angry. That might not have been the case. So that anchoring bias could be harmful. Another is attentional, where we pay attention to some of the things we want to pay attention to, and we don't pay attention to other things. Interpersonal, what takes place between individuals, personal prejudices is how they show up. And then institutional, within institutions and systems, our policies and practices, how do we maintain this bias? And then structural is think about how this plays itself out across institutions. For instance, with reporting parties, how a reporting party might call a child abuse report in, or how a hospital might determine a baby in one city been born substance exposed versus a baby in another. So across structures, how does this play itself out across structures? Next slide, Mia. Thank you. Okay. And some of the lessons learned, you guys, and kind of is that it's important to have the commitment and the buy-in of leadership throughout the organization and the front line, and how leaders show up in courageous ways, help their staff to sit in a space of feeling safe, to be able to have conversations and discussions that sometimes feel conflictual, or maybe are sometimes uncomfortable. So how do we set in this how to help ourselves and our staff to set in some of that discomfort? Being a data-driven organization, monitoring and communicating success, what do we do with data? How do we look at data? What does it tell us about certain groups of people, certain trends? Like if you see certain trends in certain communities or certain groups, what does it tell you, and where do you need to make changes? Also, as you communicate with the communities, when you think in terms of engagement, relationship, partnership, engaging, how do you use this data to have these conversations? And then monitoring, feedback, and it's not something we talk about as much as perhaps we should, feedback loops. So when you put this data information out there, and people provide you input, what do you do with the data? How do you, with that information, how do you make changes? How do you incorporate it in your policy? How do you incorporate that in your practice? How do you train your staff around that information? Investing in efforts to develop leadership and staff. So this could be through training, could be work with your academies. And I think back to the conversation I had about bias, and even with the bias, there are antidotes to the bias, right? There's work that we did that provide antidotes when you think about dominant culture, and then we crosswalk those antidotes to CPM and the behaviors. So that's a wonderful resource in developing staff and leadership. As we move into this discussion further, there are resources that are available, lots of literature, lots of trainings to help leaders to grow and to inform their staff. And then partner with other entities. Again, I mentioned the academies. How do you partner with your mental health, with the Department of Education, with probation, to have discussions around race equity, perhaps even do overlays about the data and see how this impacts families and plays itself out. So with that, there are a number of leadership behaviors that showed up in this series, which it would include engagement, advocacy, how do we advocate for groups of people, and then accountability, how do we as leaders hold ourselves accountable? And I think in the other section someone mentioned risk. How do we as leaders and directors lean into risk to a sufficient degree that we're comfortable, perhaps calculated risk, but how do we lean into those risk to kind of help lead ourselves forward? So again, there were some of the behaviors that showed up through this series: engagement, advocacy, accountability, to name a few, but certainly all of them are at play. And with that, thank you for your time. And I'm going to turn it over to Sylvia DePorto.
All right. Thank you, Gary. That was a great recap of the first 3 sessions. And as we learned about racism in the child welfare system, I think it was important for us to acknowledge that it does exist, and our experiences in this country as people of color, what that meant for us. We touched a little bit on the experience of African Americans with the child welfare system. And as we thought about where to go when we finished those first 3 sessions, we felt it was important to really continue our journey and explore the experiences of other groups in this country who've had negative experiences with the child welfare system. And so we then partnered with California Department of Social Services Office of Tribal Affairs and developed 3 sessions specifically focused on the Native American experience in this country and in California. Those sessions were delivered in the fall of 2021 and early 2022. Next slide, Mia. So we felt that it was important to review our data, or the lack of it, in our current system so that we could better understand the issues of disproportionality and disparity of Native American children in the California child welfare system. It was also very important to understand the historical context of Native American people in our country and the impact that that experience had and continues to have today on Native people and their communities. Lastly, the importance of having knowledge about the many laws and practices by the United States government that continue today that impacted Native American people's experience in this country, especially when in reference to children and families. And we learned about how that manifested itself in things like the boarding school project, the relocation project, and the adoption project. Those were just a few of the things we learned about. Next slide, Mia. These were our learning objectives for the second and third session. And I think as we moved through this, it was so important for us to be able to understand the difference when it came to Native people and the understanding that tribes are sovereign nations. And therefore, our interaction with tribes is in a government to government context. This is not an ethnic distinction, it is a political distinction. Tribes are sovereign nations housed within a nation. And so our relationship with them is government to government. It's respectful, it's engaging, it's teaming, right? It's a partnership because they are a government that is equal to the federal and state government. And tribal engagement and consultation are really required as a part of that sovereignty to ensure the respect necessary given to tribes as sovereign nations. It's required. because it is a government to government relationship. So the Indian Child Welfare Act is really one way of repairing the damage this country has inflicted upon Native American people. And child welfare leadership is really responsible for ensuring the appropriate application at all levels of the organization. So as we moved on in our sessions, that's where we landed with the experience of Native American people. And then we moved on to the Latinx series, which we have just heard the last of the third sessions today. So through these last 9 webinars, together we've seen how the core practice model promotes fair and equitable practice for all families, for tribes, youth, communities of color, and in particular, it can really balance the power in ways that reduce isolation, that reduce marginalization and oppression. So and that often accompanies the system that we work in, right? And so we wanted to give you a few more examples today from leaders who really have focused on advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion within the workplace, both for families, tribes, communities, but also for their staff. So I wanted to start with, we want to hear some stories from a couple different leaders here in child welfare. I didn't know if Michelle Love has been able to join us. She was having she was running late. So has she been able to join us yet? If not, Judy has some additional folks that she can have speak to that experience.
Yeah. Hi, Sylvia. Thank you. Wonderful recap of our previous learning. I wanted to invite Bree Marchman, who is the director for San Mateo.
Try Marin.
Marin. Oh my gosh, I just drew a blank. I'm so sorry, Bree. That happens. Thank you so much for joining us and agreeing to share your story of community engagement and humility. I think it is perfect for this part of our session today. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks, Judy. I mean, a lot of the work that we've been doing in Marin has specifically been around how can we work on bias of our staff and how that shows up in our work with families if we haven't worked on how bias shows up internally in our own agency and in decisions that have been made and ways that people have felt unheard, unseen, or undervalued over time by their peers, by leadership, by the larger organization. So we really spent a lot of time looking at what are our internal policies and practices, especially around things like how we recruit, advertise, the questions we ask in hiring, how the decisions that we make, how we decide what candidates are doing well in interviews, all the way through opportunities for mentorship and opportunities for promotion and how those things come about, how things are communicated, how opportunities are communicated. So many aspects of these issues over time had really left staff feeling like there had been harm done. And so we really needed to take accountability for that and find ways to promote some more transparency, more opportunities to build trust, because trust had really eroded over time. And in that type of environment, you can have every training and, potential coaching around how do we work across difference, but people weren't going to be able to hear those messages if they didn't feel like their leadership and their agency was listening to them as folks of color with their own experiences of feeling biased against over time. So we actually spent a lot of time just listening to what staff had to say, and knowing that trust was not there, we actually hired a restorative justice mediator who came in, and she actually helped do a presentation with me not that long ago. And that was an excellent experience because using the tenets of restorative justice, we were able to look at how do we how do we acknowledge harm done? How do we come to a place of healing so the folks that felt harm and the folks that had done harm could come together and be integrated into our larger community of our office. So it was a pretty interesting time, because we really had to just think about the ways in which we had presented our work, our viewpoints, how we make decisions, how transparent we are, our messaging, and really just come down to being really vulnerable and authentic and genuine. Because if we couldn't do that, no one was going to listen to anything that we had to say. Like, we had to come from a place of looking at our own selves and how that had impacted, how we had been trained up in child welfare to look at things like, how do we decide what is the best answer in an interview question? How do we decide who's the best selection for a promotion? And did we look at all the aspects that play into things? Like, one of the things that we looked at that was really big was staff who wanted extra mentorship, who were seeking out opportunities to try on leadership roles, weren't always our staff of color, and leadership didn't really understand the concept of like the imposter syndrome, and staff of color who felt like over their lifetimes of experiences not feeling like they were worthy to step forward and say, I need some extra mentoring and support. And so how do we combat that? How do we seek out staff who may not be jumping up and down saying, I want that support, I want that help? How do we seek them out and make those opportunities more equitable across all staff? I mean, that's just one of a lot of different examples of things that we looked at. And probably most powerful is just making opportunities for staff to feel heard and express things that had happened to them, some of which we never even had known about, and really giving those an opportunity to be out there and acknowledged. And then, moving toward a sense of healing and forward movement. Like, how can we do some work on our own practices and policies to make sure these things are not happening again? Or if they do happen, how do we acknowledge, repair, and move toward healing? Because we're not going to get it right every time. We're going to continue to make mistakes. And being more aware of how our biases have played into decisions and practices, it's a step in the right direction, but we still have a lot of work to do, for sure. You're muted, Judy.
That mute button, boy, gets me every time. That is a wonderful story, and I encourage you to see the chat. Dr. Rogero Hernandez, put a comment there of how vulnerability and authenticity is the basis for integrity, and I think that doing that kind of work with your staff is meaningful. And I love the parallel to restorative justice. I'd like to know more about that, so I'm going to give you a call for sure. Now I want to introduce Melissa Lloyd, a director from Sacramento, who's also going to share a story of her use of integrated core practice model. And I thank you for joining us, Melissa. I know you stepped out of another meeting, so thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Judy. And so good to see so many familiar faces of people I also haven't seen for a while. So nice to be here. I was toggling back and forth between a FFPSA fiscal meeting and this. So I'm happy to be back here. The other one was giving me a headache. The first part of this today's meeting was just so inspiring, and I wish I could have stayed on for the other piece that I missed. But thank you, Judy, for reaching out. Judy specifically asked for me to share a little bit about our cultural broker program in Sacramento County. In a nutshell, back in 2000, kind of late 2014, early 2015, we started exploring the cultural broker model out of Fresno County. And part of what led us to this work was really in leadership, really starting to take a focus on how we needed to be action oriented around the systemic barriers with the African American families that we serve. Our exits and entries of kids in care were desperate. We, definitely, just like many other jurisdictions, struggle with issues of disproportionality. I'm very proud to say that our data is looking better and better as each year goes on in this area. But one of the things that we really needed to pay attention to was, by looking at our data, we had to do self-reflection on how did our system contribute to the missed opportunities? How did our system accept bias? And truly a lack of partnering specifically with the Black community in Sacramento County. And so that was really our why as to, why we delved into this. We have an incredibly strong cultural broker program that has been developed again through that Fresno model that Margaret Jackson developed and leads. And we've enhanced it over time. And we've been able to enhance it because of the outcomes that we're seeing. So specifically as to CPM being present in our cultural broker model, really the model embraces SOP. Embedded in the model is coaching and supports specific to SOP and CPM behaviors. Part of what we have done specifically, and we have continuity to doing, is the selection of cultural brokers is by virtue, it's not just siloed within our child welfare agency. We partner with various community providers so that the cultural brokers come from their agencies to work and compile a full team that serves the Sacramento community. The approach is to advocate, but it's really in a manner that supports the family. Yet the beautiful thing about the cultural broker program, which I know is very similar in other programs, is that there's transparent communication about safety and risk. And it really, what happens in the teaming, both between child welfare staff, the cultural brokers, and the family, is that it really breaks down for the family, really breaks down why the agency is involved. And so we have had to demonstrate humility through this process and allow ourselves to be educated, allow for some emotion, I guess you'd call it emotionality, emotions to come through as we have been developing, and then again, further enhancing our program and really listening to the voice of community. We've taken time with our staff to explain our why. We routinely share our data with the community as well as with our staff, so they're understanding the progress that is being made. And our staff, just like what has been my experience, and I started out 22 years ago as a frontline social worker, my experience is that there's often the unknown is very intimidating to people. And so we had what is, I think, very common in many child welfare jurisdictions. Workers say, we don't really need anyone to help us with our families. Why would we need this? Why is somebody else going to go out on a visit with us? What are they, what is a broker going to discuss with a parent, and should I be involved in that? So there was kind of that that development with our staff that was necessary, that really honed down the importance of teaming, the importance of allowing voice to come forward, and helping also for staff to be accepting of that, but to understand. And as with a lot of things, it really took time for our staff to have the experience where there was that buy-in. And now our staff are beyond excited to have a broker assigned to their family. Really, the work of the brokers, it really centers on understanding, helping a family to understand the system, amplifying that family and child voice, but also but also, and very important, is they are not on anyone's side, so to speak. They are supportive of both agency accountability, as well as ensuring that families and children understand what's occurring. And that's really key, because through our training and our fidelity to the model and ensuring that we stay aware and focused on the fidelity of the model, the initial engagement of the brokers, again, both with our staff and with families, they're very clear on their role. They're extremely clear on their role. And again, straight talk, being transparent with folks. And it's turned out in most every family situation where there has been success. Our cultural brokers, similar to parent partners, similar to other models, they meet with children and families. They help to essentially broker the relationship between agency and family. And they attend court hearings. They'll engage with a parent's attorney along with the parent. We've engaged our court partners, multiple system partners in general. They will support families in advocating for themselves with different systems. They will participate in CFTs, in prevention CFTs, multidisciplinary team meetings. And part of our staying accountable is that we do evaluations. We have evaluations that are provided to all those that are served by a broker. And routinely, the percentages of folks reporting they had good communication and trust with the department is 95% and above. Reporting back that there was improved communication with not only the department, but with system partners. And just a couple of quick examples while I wrap this up. Just a couple of quotes that I wanted to share with you all in regard to a few of our parents so far. One parent said, "My cultural broker was great. She never gave up on us. Thank you for all the support throughout this long process." This was a mother whose children were returned home and dependency was ultimately terminated. Another mom whose services were terminated and whose relatives applied to care for the children shared, "My cultural broker's role in the closing of my case was that she helped me understand what my social worker was worried about." And then from another mom whose services were terminated, "I always appreciated my cultural broker for always being real with me." And then lastly, a quote from a family who completed all of their services, "My cultural broker's role in the closure of my case was that she checked on us and asked if there was anything we didn't understand. She explained what the next steps for closing my case was." So overall with this model, we have found that we have better trust within our system partners, our community partners. Our social workers have shared how incredibly beneficial this has been for their work with parents and children in the Black community. And we've built up trust overall in the community. And we're seeing it in our data. We've got our numbers are looking so much better. And again, sharing that data is so powerful so that our staff really see the benefit of why Sacramento County has invested and continues to invest in this model.
Wow, just an incredible example of the work that you're doing. And I think what is most obvious in both of your stories is the bravery and the courage that you are showing in pursuing this kind of work. Just quickly want to call out some of the obvious CPM leadership behaviors that I'm hearing. The teaming and that is happening around structural supports, whether it be a consultant or an SME, or with the community and the court. I mean, it was just very rich in the teaming, engagement in teaming, right? As it relates to not having to know everything, relying on others and even the families to be the experts in their own lives, right? And then finally, I think the accountability and advocacy is so clear in that, the investment that you both are making in your organizations, right? And also the use of data. I think the data holds us accountable, and you lifted that up perfectly, Melissa. So I want to thank you guys so much for being such great examples of CPM leadership in our state, and just appreciate so much the work that you're doing. Thank you for being a part of today's webinar. I'll turn it over back to Andrea. Oh, okay, Sylvia.
So yes, thank you guys both so much. Those were some great examples of really the core practice model in action. And we really appreciate you sharing that today. And I think what I want to highlight is not so much the practice behaviors. I want to reiterate what Judy identified, that inquiry and exploration that's happening with the staff in Marin, and then that advocacy to really support the staff. And then in Melissa's that advocacy and accountability that's happening to make sure that happens. That this is not something new, right? It's the core practice model behaviors are incorporated into the work you're already doing. It's not one more thing to add to our plates, right? It's just what we're doing with our work and really demonstrating those practice behaviors. So I just want to reiterate that. And as we think about that, I want you to think about that. We're going to do a breakout session, and I want you to think about all of those examples you've heard today, and the core practice model behaviors and what that means to you in your own work in your counties. We're going to go into a breakout session to answer a few questions. And when we come back, we'll just highlight some of those answers.
Stuart, can you stop share so I can see the? Thanks.
Bye, everybody. I gotta hop off.
Thank you, Judy.
Do any of you here need help getting to your breakout room? I know Barry and Anita are staying out here with us.
Hi, I think I do. My computer didn't hook up to the audio,
okay.
So I have it on my phone now.
I'll send you to one.
Are you there?
Veronica, do you need help getting to your breakout room? Oh no, Anita. Anita's audio is is in a breakout room, but let me find you. Move to main session. Okay. That's funny.
I was just thinking, what's going on? Why am I hearing Jennifer's voice? Thank you, Mia.
So breakouts. Welcome back from your breakout sessions. If you want to, go ahead and drop into chat. You made some commitment statements to how you would advance race, equity, and diversity and inclusion in your own practice. Feel free to drop those into chat. We're going to invite everybody. We'd love to see chat light up with the commitment to this movement of advancing equity in our practice.
This meeting is being recorded.
Great. Welcome back from the breakout sessions. You guys were in a great conversation around ways you would advance race, equity, diversity, and inclusion in your own practice, no matter what you do in your own county organization from any angle or perspective. You were talking about those commitments. We'd love to see them in chat. Feel free to drop them into chat so we can sort of, as a collective, look at our big impact in this space in California. So feel free, drop your commitments into chat.
Okay, what do we do? Okay.
Let's look at what we're going to do together.
Yep. What I'm seeing here, may I share, Andrea, is intention to move forward, knowing full well that challenges are going to be there, but at the same time, great hope that folks can move forward, and that the work that we're doing here today is, you know, it's just a good reminder of what's going well, so that we have some examples. Yeah.
We also heard a lot about a commitment to continue to come from a place of inquiry and teaming with families, rather than be reactive, which I know historically child welfare has had a tendency to do.
Yeah. There also was, you know, the importance of data in the sense of lining up with inquiry and exploration, because it's the starting place, you know, to be able to understand what is what's going to work in your community, and what are the problems that you're going to tackle.
We also heard a lot about having a parallel process for our management, our supervisors, and then that will also, you know, be supportive to our social workers and our community partners and everybody that we're working with.
Yeah.
I look at Laura's comment. How exciting. Centering Ready at that leadership kind of executive level. That's incredible.
Well, also holding an equity lens. You know, that thing of, you know, you have to, as you mentioned earlier in our presentation, Andrea, the work that we have been doing with the REDI is a lens that folks can look through, or should be encouraged to look through when they're looking at data, when they're looking at staffing, when they're beginning to explore and inquire. Yeah.
This is all great, you all. This is Anita here. We're going to flip to our last little piece for this webinar. It's a poll. Mia's going to pull out up 3 questions, and we just ask you to just briefly answer these questions, and then she'll show the results. And this is just mainly to see, you know, what you've gotten from the last 3 sessions on the Latinx webinars, and about how it relates to CPM and race, equity, diversity, inclusion, and has it increased your readiness to take action to promote READY in your work. So we're going to answer those questions, look to see where we all are after this time together, and then I'll turn it over to Stuart.
Give everyone another minute or so. Looks like there's about 29 participants have responded so far.
That might be most of our participants
Yeah,
that
it's
aren't
getting
part
down.
of
It's like, okay,
the
launch the results.
Excellent. So great to see that everyone either strongly agreed or somewhat agreed that the webinar series has helped to identify ways to center Latinx family experience in practice. Thank you for that. And similarly, we only had a little bit of disagreement about learning about how CPM could promote race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that's good to know that there's still some space for us to do more linking between those. And we'll be doing some of that for those of you who are directors, child welfare directors. Will be really leaning in on that work at our 7th leadership session in July. And then again, everyone agreed or somewhat agreed that everyone's ready to promote, ready. So thank you all so much for your participation in this poll and in this webinar and all of the webinars across the last year and a half. I'll turn it over to Stuart now.
Great, thank you. Wow, those results were really amazing. If I'm a glass half full kind of guy, that was more. That glass is definitely more than half full. If we think back to the learning objectives that Gary went over earlier, that we launched with this series, I think we've. If we don't have the mission accomplished banner up quite yet, it's getting there. So thanks to everybody who's worked on this series and done such a great job of bringing you this cascading series of wonderful webinars, Zoom sessions, experiences. It's been a great 9 sessions, and I think as I say, it looks like we're accomplishing our objectives. We're still working on it, but we've had some great people working on this, and if we could stand and give them a round of applause, we would. Thanks, not just for today's sessions, but for all of the sessions. As Anita noted, we're continuing to evolve the core practice model to incorporate the learnings that we've gained over these 9 sessions and over these this year and a half or so of work we've been doing here. The core practice model is not static. We're doing some work offline to try to, again, incorporate this to kind of bring it up to more of an overt recognition of the race, equity, diversity, and inclusion factors that we need to consider in the child welfare program. And we have a director's learning session later this month where we will actually be integrating that work and then bringing it back out for some stakeholder input and reflection at some point. So, we're so glad that all of you and your colleagues have joined us on this journey, and we'll continue to engage you in the conversations about how we can improve the core practice model to improve the lives of all children and families who have experiences in the child welfare system. And so we will continue to do that, continue to keep you apprised, whether you're involved directly or indirectly. And as we noted at the beginning, we have some great resources on the CFPIC website. I'm going to bring it up for just a moment as we end so that we can kind of highlight where you can go to get more information and where you can have your direct your colleagues. So if you go to cfpic.org, this is our main page, and it highlights a lot of the work, all the work we're doing, but we have a tab right over here on the right that says REI. And if you click on that, that'll take you to a little bit of background. It has all of the sessions, and we'll have today's session up soon, but you can click on all of them to get the recording and the presentations. Some of them have supporting materials as well. So great information there about these sessions. And as I said, Andrea is working with our regional training academy partners to update to produce a sort of a summary document that will also be here on the website. And we have a resource library that Virginia's been curating. And if you could click on that, you can see that we have a whole array of resources that are available. So CFPIC and the core practice model faculty have been working hard to make sure that we not only get this push this information out, but it's always available to you and your colleagues. So please, when you get a chance, spend some time on the CFPIC website, review the materials, share them with your staff, share them with others, and let us know if you have any feedback, any input. So with that, we are at 12:00:38, and I think we're at the end of the day. And thank you all so much for being here. Great session. And thanks to Virginia, Javi, the whole team, and Andrea for making this happen. So everybody have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and I guess a happy 4th of July coming up. We hope that as our country grows older, we hope that it continues, that it grows better, and that we continue to do what we can to improve the lives of all Americans.